Are there any offensive people in the audience? And I don't mean like my wife's definition of offensive, like just like, you know, like red team people, gray hat guys. And thank God. Okay.
Messy people. Yes.
No, it's my happy people. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit quicker. We're going to go a little faster. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, but you can all have the slides, all of the backup data. Who did bio in high school? College?
How about graduates?
Who's a biologist? Who drinks on Sunday mornings? I love you guys, all of you. All right, so we have a little quick introduction here. There's our outline. I got this really cute picture. I thought I'd add that up there because that adds to the tone. It's just a warm little smiles that they have and everything. So here we go. Because I was an NSA guy, you heard him mention that. Okay, I have to give my disclaimer. NSA policy 1-30 says that anything I talk about here is my ideas and mine alone, not that of the. Okay, so let's talk about what we think of when we talk about the human-machine interface, humans, and where you fit into IoT. Now, the first thing that comes to mind in the medical field are things like the insulin pump, defibrillators, cochlear implants, hearing aids, things like that. All these things, like I was talking to a couple of folks up here before, they run off of Windows 95. They run off Windows 98 Second Edition. I have an MRI that I did a pen test on. It ran off of Windows ME. Now, if you remember that one, that was a really good version of Windows.
It was secure. Fine.
That was out there for a week or so, right? And then we had to get rid of it because it was horrible. It's horrible. But we're not going to talk about these things. But this is generally what people think of when you speak of anything medical and IT. We're going to talk about nano applications. So in the world of nano applications, there's thousands of applications for the use of nanoparticles. Single electron transistors, sunscreens, antimicrobial coatings, industrial catalysts, food packaging. It's used in agriculture. You have nanoparticles in, if you're wearing blue jeans, you have nanoparticles in your blue jeans. They are capable of holding data in them. Think about that for a second. It's there for color, which is great, but because of the style that's used in blue jeans right now, it can actually hold data. So, Levi and Wrangler, they're the ones that use them.
So my 5-pen can hold data.
What's that?
My 5-pen, it's got a nano layer, it can hold data.
It depends upon the types of nanoparticles that are used. Yep.
Are you saying that intelligence runs in your genes?
That was kind of awesome. So in nano applications, these are the four main categories of nanoparticles that are out there, okay? And we're going to talk a little bit about each of them. So just so you get the idea of what's happening in nanoparticles that are synthesized, the ones that we make, and then nanoparticles, biological nanomachines, things that are already in your body, there are correlations between what we're making and what's already there. Like you need energy, you have batteries that store energy, right? Well, guess what? Your body has stuff like that in it already. We're not going to get super technical because we're already lost like 20 minutes on this thing. But understand, all that's happening in the nano field right now are replications of what exists in nature. And we're just making something synthetically that's already there. So, big overview, kind of cut down a little bit. Nanomachines, they can perform trivial tasks on their own because of limited capability and the size. And size is what limits what you can do with nanoparticles for the most part. So communication amongst nanoparticles is kind of limited. You can only do so much. nanomachines can be interconnected and they can execute collaboratively tasks as opposed to individually. So functionally, there's 4 types of communications. Electromagnetic, it's based on the transmission and receipt of different types of electromagnetic waves, obviously. It covers things like electromagnetic waves between nanotubes, graphene, those types of things. You have acoustics, which is ultrasound, things like that in your body. Nanomechanical communications is a unique one in that the particles themselves actually have to be touching in order to transmit together. So if you have nanoparticles that are used for cardiac sensors, and we have those, right? You cannot use nanomechanical communications because those sensors have to be placed in different places around the heart. And there has to be distance between them so they can measure activities of the heart and identify anomalies and differences. So if they're touching each other, it won't work. And then we have, at the end, we have the molecular communication aspect. And this is the transmission of biochemical information and electrical information, which is indicative of the neurologic system. Now, if you look at your body and you look at an IT network and we compare OSI models, you can see there's a bit of similarity here between the two. The molecular communications architecture consists of the information molecules that contain data that are going to be transmitted, and they move in the same manner through the different layers. There's 6 layers in your body, but with the sublayers in the physical layer, there's actually 7 layers, just like the OSI model itself. How fortuitous for someone who is trying to mimic the use of different types of cells in your body. So how do we send packages? Well, the packets get sent kind of the same way in code. I mean, you could read it right there. Data that's stored in nanoparticles is sent the same way through a molecular communication system that we would do in the neurological system. There's absolutely minor differences, right? But there's really no difference in functionality in how it actually happens. Now, all right, back to bio. So, different types of nanocarriers that are already there in your body. Nanoparticles are made with the same types of properties. Why? So they do the same types of things. They perform the same types of actions, the same functions, and operate in the same manner. So take up, let's look at the liposome for a minute there. Okay, up here in the top side. You can actually store, so there's 2 lipid layers, right? The green dots around the outside and the one on the inside. And then there's an aqueous filling or water-based filling between those 2 layers of fat. So you can actually store data in the layers of fat or in the water based on, is it hydrophilic? Is it lipophilic, right? Is it going to attach and stick to it? This is being done today, as a matter of fact. There's about 30-something. If you go to nano.gov, you can see there's like 35 or 40 different research efforts that go and do in vivo work. So, why are we talking about this? Why is the body so important? Why are we concerned that the body is going to be used for IoT stuff? Well, this is not a one-off. This has been done before. You've probably heard of the MK Ultra program. Dr. Jose Delgado, he was one of the lead neuropsychiatrists. And he said something very, very profound. It's up there on the top. You can read it. I'm not going to read it to you, but he made it very clear that we are going to be part of an extended network. And he said this back in 74, just before what happened in 76. The Church Commission, when the CIA had to disclose the fact that they were doing all of these research efforts without parental or without patient consent. Yeah.
They were dosing people.
Oh, they were. I mean, you pick your own, pick one of the 200 and something cases of research efforts that they were doing, right? There was an effort called Science Club. It was a joint MIT, I believe it was General Foods, and Quaker. They had a team of folks that went up to Children's Hospital just outside of Boston. And they took all of the kids that were mentally retarded, mental illness, things like that, no family, mildly to moderately, severely mentally retarded, developmentally disabled, and they gave them cereal. As part of Science Club, they enticed them to come in, they'd take them to ball games, all this really cool stuff. And the cereal was laced with radioactive material so they could identify and measure the effects of radioactivity on the body. This was just one of the efforts that he's referring to with the MK Ultra program. But here's some of the other quotes. Dr. Jose Delgado was one of the leaders of a significant effort of research. Okay, we have a lot of history in looking into controlling the brain and controlling bodies. Okay, so we're going to go here just a really quick. Let me check my audio, double checked. Happy.
Electronic mind control research is not new. A scientific milestone in this area came in the 1960s. When Dr. Jose Delgado demonstrated remote control over a charging bull. By connecting a radio antenna to electrodes inserted into the bull's brain, Delgado proved that the animal's aggressive impulses could be thwarted by electronically manipulating the bull's muscle reflexes.
Do you realize the fantastic possibilities if from the outside we could modify the inside? Could we give messages to the inside? But the beauty is that now we are not using electrodes.
In recent years, Delgado has shown that the behavior of monkeys can be altered using low-power, pulsating magnetic fields. But in these experiments, there were no antenna implants.
Any function in the brain, emotions, intellect, personality, well, could be perhaps modified by this non-invasive technology.
Delgado's research has so far been limited to animals. But in the Soviet Union, a radio frequency, or RF device, has been used for over 30 years to manipulate the moods of mental patients.
You've heard about how the Russians used electromagnetic waves to affect, right? And we had that, what do they call it, the radio wave effect that made people sick in Cuba, at the embassy in Cuba. This happened in, right. So where did the research start? I don't know, but I know that we're continuing down that road right now. The Pentagon's a little bit behind on their program. There's a couple of programs. You can read about them at DARPA.gov or DARPA.mil, I think it is. They're talking about putting little black boxes in the brain of every soldier. Like Dr. Delgado said, right? Generals will be controlled on the battlefield. We're going to control what they're going to do. We're going to control what soldiers are going to do. So understand that all of this research that's happening is linked to something else, okay? All right, let's play the thing. This is from the Naval Postgraduate School. This
Okay,
research
everybody knows what this
4
is.
years ago.
A laser, right? Nice beam of light in many applications. Have you ever, what about sound? Can we create a laser-like or a beam of sound? Well, it's very hard to do. And the reason it's hard to do is that typical sound wavelengths are like this big. And long wavelengths bend. They bend around objects. If you have two people on either side of a barrier here, an opaque barrier, they can't see each other, but they can hear each other, right? How can that happen? Well, the sound diffracts. And it diffracts because the wavelength's long. When the wavelength's small, if the wavelength was very small, the sound would just go out here, this person wouldn't hear. So this makes it really hard to create a beam, but people have been extremely clever about this, and there is a way. It's complicated. We teach it in an advanced course here, and it takes 2 lectures. Is that right, Andres? Oh, he left. He's supposed to do that? Yeah, so I'm going to try to give you just a basic, make this really simple. This is called an audio spotlight, and it's only $2,000. And you know who paid for it? Your parents, right? Okay. So what it does is it has some transducers here, some discs that generate sound, and it puts out 65,000 hertz, 65 kilohertz. How high can we hear?
2,000.
Around 20,000. Well, you might be able to. You get older? I'm down around 11.
I don't think even them can hear. I don't think
Yeah, I
they.
think, yeah.
Right now they are probably 18 or 17,000.
But you should have a hearing test. It's important. Thing. So anyway, 65 kilohertz, way beyond ours. Dogs can't hear it. It turns out cats can. Okay, bats, no problem. They're typically, they go up to 100,000 hertz. All right? So we can't hear this. It's going, I haven't turned it on yet. When I do, it's going to blast out a 65 kilohertz beam. Because the wavelength is so small, it doesn't spread. Because 65 kilohertz has a wavelength like that. So it's going to be, in that sense, similar to a laser. It just comes right out as a beam. Now, how do we make that audible? Well, they put a modulation on top of the 65 kilohertz. There's a modulation. And now, here's the next thing I have to tell you. That 65 kilohertz is very high amplitude. It won't hurt you, we don't think. Okay? You certainly can't hear it, and we don't think it'll hurt you. And it's very high amplitude. And what happens when you have 2 sound waves like this, sound plus sound can create sound, but only at high amplitudes. At low amplitudes, sound waves just travel right through each other. You may be sort of familiar with this. But at high amplitudes, you can create sound. So what happens in this apparatus is the audio sound, the sound that you're going to hear, is actually created in the beam, not here. And because it's created in the beam and it stays in the beam, we have a beam of sound. So let me demonstrate this for you. Let me turn it on. And I'm going to find the piece of music that we like.
Yeah.
You may not like it.
The Eagles. You like the Eagles? Okay, good. Oh, we have a friendly audience this year.
Yeah. I think they're just saying that to make us feel better.
Right.
All right. It's worth the $2,000. It's not our money.
Audible, but it plays in their head.
Now, the sound that you're hearing is being created in this beam. It almost sounds like it's coming from your head. So let me try to scan the whole audience here so everybody gets to hear this. Absolutely remarkable. Pete, are you getting it?
So you can bounce it off the wall. You can send it through a wall. Drywall works best. Okay? But you absolutely are vulnerable to something you can't even see, hear, sense, taste, touch, or smell. For years, we thought that giraffes just chewed around and looked like idiots, you know, like that, right? Giraffes talk to each other at 7 hertz. You can't hear 7 hertz, but scientists have just picked up data, and they're starting to decode a very complex language that giraffes have. We're so smart, right? Anyway, math slide for all the folks, just give you a break for a second. So, nano-enabled aerosols is how you do, in our case study, this is how we deliver nanoparticles to people. There's a lot of pharmaceutical applications for aerosols, right? Albuterol inhaler, that has nanoparticles in it, all kinds of things. You're really lucky. You get exposed to a lot of nanoparticles, you don't even know it. So some of these, like the Trojan particles, is a macro type of a manipulation for the particle. Basically, there's an enzyme coating that goes across it that allows it to become invisible in the body. So getting particles, like, for example, past the blood-brain barrier into the brain would immediately stop. It wouldn't happen because the particle would be identified, it would be detained, and it would be removed from the body by the macrophage. Macrophages are like big white blood cells that come and drag things out of your body that shouldn't be there. Well, if you put the enzyme coating on top of these guys as a Trojan particle, it's completely invisible and your blood-brain barrier opens up just wide enough and allows these nanoparticles into your brain. So, of course, there's 4 different types of the aerosols I just showed you there. The nanosuspensions increases bioavailability, higher drug loads. The particles is a macro deception, like I explained. Bioadhesive is a kind of more of a micro deception thing. We're not going to get into that too much today. And then small particle aerosols. And we used active targeting to be able to get a high dose to a very limited area of where we wanted the nanoparticles to get to. So we weren't wasting hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars in our experiment. Now, we went off of the existing research that showed how effective nanoaerosols are. And there's one caution, is that in nanoaerosols, there is a potential, if the nanoparticles are small enough, they can actually fit in between the cilia in the lungs and can remain embedded there for months and or years. You can't cough it out, and you can't remove it through mucus extraction of the lungs itself. Won't go. We had to measure signal ratios, obviously, if we're going to use the neurological system as a molecular communication transit system to move our signal to get our nanoparticles to do what we need them to do. And the focus of where we aimed our research at was affecting the median nerve. There's 3 main branches in the median nerve, the plantar surface and stuff, and I won't get into all that stuff. However, I will say that we did direct our efforts towards the median nerve here. And here's the full length of the median nerve from the cervical C5T1 area of the spine. And what we did was we took an MRI. We had people get in. We did a complete MRI of them from the waist up. And we turned that into a matrix, digitized it, put it into the computer, right? And we had all of the analytics, the physiology and anatomy of each of the subjects in the study itself. So we knew exactly, like if there was a standard deviation in aortas, right? In some situations you have 3 branches that come out of the aorta, and others you have 5, but they're normal. But you have to know where those types of things are if you're going to do the right thing with your nanoparticles, the right thing. And we use things like localized temperature, pH, life cycle of tissue. Some cells die faster than others. The biochronicity of each of the tissues matters when you're trying to implant, and make sure that you have enough nanoparticles to have your message move through the system. So what did we do for the case study, and why is this important? We used an aerosol distribution. We waited 30 minutes, and we released another aerosol distribution of nanoparticles. They were carriers, they were sensors, they were guide nanoparticles, helped to identify what types of cells we wanted the nanoparticles to get to. We had them moved into place based on predefined information. And what we did was we created an array in the back of the right hand that connected to Bluetooth 4.0. It was under the second level of the dermis, so the second level of skin. The nanoparticles formed an array and received a connection from Bluetooth 4.0. We ran that signal up the median nerve of the right arm. The nanoparticles themselves were spaced out so that the signal to noise ratio didn't go below a certain level, so we were able to maintain control, command and control of the nanoparticles that were in the left hand. And what we did was we ran commands from the right hand to the left hand. And in the left hand, we had nanoparticles that had acetylcholine in them. They were nanocarriers. And if you know about acetylcholine neurotransmitters, this is fun stuff. We targeted one aspect of the palmar median nerve, and we released the acetylcholine all at once, and that paralyzes you. And we paralyzed one finger. We chose one finger to paralyze. Well, this is the one we chose, right? And after a specified duration of time, we were able to have it release again. The body created acetylcholine esterase and it balanced back out, and you could get. So think about if you have an active shooter scenario, you can stop someone from pulling a trigger, right? So,
Which finger he's using.
depending upon the figure. So why is this important? Why is this important? So let's talk about DNA just for a second. I know it sounds like it's a disparate concept and it's different, right? But nanoparticles enable DNA transport. In here with CRISPR, who's heard of CRISPR? Tastes great, less filling, right? So, you know how it works. We're not going to do the this is how CRISPR works slide because you don't need that. But what we do with data is we give each a binary code, and we can write messages in binary. Well, we assign that to nitrogenous bases. And in doing so, we use some of that 80% of the unused DNA space in your body to write messages and store it as nitrogenous bases. Here's an example of recombination in CRISPR-Cas. Now, you can't see it too well, but over here is where there was errors, but it doesn't actually manipulate functionality. So in areas like this, you could put anything you want and store data. So technically, the math slide, this one, I was going to show this, not show it, and then I figured I'd show it because we don't have a lot of time. But basically what it comes down to is 6.45 exabits of data can be stored in a human at any one time. Okay? Now think about that and trying to keep your, now you can pull DNA out of the air, right? And you can also pull DNA out of mosquitoes. We've taken and resected mosquitoes and pulled the DNA out of them, of humans who were in the room with them, and identified who that person was based in a closed database of people that we had available. And why is that important? Because we've done operations like this, Operation Big Buzz and Operation Dropkick, where we've released mosquitoes in the US population. These were in Savannah, Georgia. And they went out and they wanted to see what the reach of the mosquitoes were and how they would affect the populations.
They missed my house.
Missed your house?
No, they got to my house.
You got your, oh, okay. Well, that explains a lot. My goodness. So you can see that we may not be weaponizing this now, or anymore, I guess I could say, but others could. Think of Zika virus, okay? It was a big rage. Why was it a big rage? Well, DNA collection. And in an effort to be as close on time as possible, just a couple of conclusions from this is nanoparticles can be put in place in your body within 30 minutes. And you'll never know that you breathe them in. You'll never know that they're there, and they could stay for months on end. Human DNA can be collected from almost anywhere. Just from the ambient environment, you can collect DNA now and identify a person 80% accurate. And it didn't take a lot of acetylcholine to paralyze our target, which was extremely interesting. It was lower than thresholds identified in the natural physiology of how you would actually use acetylcholine and acetylcholine esterase. So the security of bio-nano things is extremely important. You're going to be part of IoT sooner than you think. This is not a future thing. These experiments are happening now. And just one thing, so here you go. There's just a few things to think about of what drives you and what drives other people to do things. Because I always have to have a deception slide because that's what I do.
Quick question. Ooh, please. Non-coding regions have been found to have structural and regulatory function. It only looks like they're non-coding.
Right.
So your numbers were grossly exaggerated in terms of ability to store information because you can't modify them without extreme effects.
Okay. Okay, if you want, if that's your stance on it, that's fine.
Greg, should I just pass the mic around, or you want to choose the
Yeah,
next
you can.
person?
Sure.
Go ahead. Yeah.
What kind of countermeasures exist, or where's that thinking going?
So, yeah, there's no countermeasures in nanoparticles right now, much like SCADA systems. It's kind of the Wild West like that. The control systems that manage nanoparticles have a little bit of security, and that would be hospital security, which is your Windows 95 and your, right, stuff like that. So there's really little to no interest in securing anything right now because it limits functionality. And of course, we have to have functionality first. Yeah, and I haven't seen any efforts moving forward other than IEEE has one effort going forward for nano security. And I haven't seen anything on that in a few months now. 802, yada, yada, whatever.
Charity.
Yeah.
How about Charity? Go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, this is really fascinating, your talk. I have been doing some research on directed energy weapons and Havana syndrome and all that stuff. And I'm curious, do we know if there is capability to transmit some of that binary code that you pointed out via directed energy? RF? Yeah, RF.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know if you can confirm or deny.
So, sure, you can modulate that over a signal too. I would say that there's a few efforts underway in that realm. What I can't say is how far along they possibly could be. Yeah.
Would you stand up?
Hi. Just looking to understand practical applications for non-military use, shall we say.
Sure. Oh, so a practical application for non-military use. Great. How about controlling your own identity? Is the first thing I think of. Implementing a blockchain solution or some type of a solution at the nano or at the molecular level would be extremely helpful in not having some of the ambient DNA picked up, cloned into something else to steal your identity.
I'll speak loud enough. Actually, piggybacking on his question, for me was this accessibility. Like, how can I govern access to myself from to anyone else, right? Like, you made the suggestion of blockchain and somehow or another controlling my identity is more like near-term protections that we can do to put access to who we are. Like, as an example, I heard years ago, hey, you own your own domain, your own name, so that, or your kid's name, so that someone would go and own their name online, right? Our own being, what can we do today? Is there anything we can do today?
I would say no. Hope you feel good about that. Yeah, I don't know of any way to mitigate something like that right now.
Good question.
I really don't.
Could I trademark my own DNA? Could I do something?
No, you can't trademark anything that's naturally occurring in nature. Can't patent it, none of that stuff.
Not even your DNA, the code itself, which would be, unique to you? Or would you have to
I don't know, I'm not a,
enumerate the whole thing?
Yeah, I can't answer that, Dr. Johnson. That's a good question.
There's been several court cases. There was a case at UCLA involving a Dr. Goldie where he had a HTLV1 sequenced from a patient and used it to develop a drug, and they sued and lost, more or less.
Huh.
Maybe along the lines of
There you go.
like the stem cell, right?
Right.
Using someone's stem cells is,
Get with this.
you know, maybe as close as we can get to trademarking. Something along the same lines as they did with stem cell.
Yeah, because there is control for that. I just don't know the answer to that yet. I don't look at the legal aspect.
The legal solution is that before any kind of surgical procedure, anything like that, you give up the rights to, unless I suppose you're paying out of pocket. So you're giving up the rights.
Go ahead, this gentleman. Would you
Yeah, that's what happens with a lot of stuff now, yeah.
Quite intriguing, but I'm wondering if you're aware of any research that is being done to use the technology to probably come with treatments for mental health disorders or disabilities instead of all focusing on defense-related or
Sure.
applications.
Sure, yeah, so there's several projects out there that are actually focused on, blunt force trauma is another one of the categories out there. The Restoring Active Memory program run by DARPA is a huge one where they're actually using nanoparticles to recreate dysfunctional parts in the brain and actually bringing back a person's ability for recall. So, yeah, there's lots of really good uses for these types of technologies. And that's one of the keys in getting nanoparticles past the blood-brain barrier into the brain, is to enable those types of programs. Yeah, there's one for schizophrenia run out of up in Boston, the Harvard Medical School. Thank you. Can't think of Harvard, right? Oh, it's been a long day.
It's the nanoparticles.
It's a nanoparticle, but it's run by the Harvard Medical School on schizophrenia and normalizing schizophrenic people right now. It's highly successful. There's like a 40% success rate on very low doses. And yeah, there's lots of really good uses so far. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Spinal cord injuries, since you're talking about the using the nerve from the hand.
So the SCI office down in the Richmond VA Center, I'm working with them on actual spinal regeneration because in different parts of the body, the nerves will have different types of regenerative abilities, right? But this enhances and bridges in a way that we never thought possible before. And it's bringing back peripheral nervous sensory capability to a lot of folks. The central nervous system or the spinal cord area itself it's a little more challenging for some of the stuff they're doing, and I'm not part of that. Peripheral nervous system, done a lot of good stuff there.
Greg, can I ask, what about augmenting intelligence, putting computer systems in us and allowing us to communicate telepathically? Would that be possible, a wireless of sorts?
Great. So there's a couple of programs that are actually forward-leaning like that. One's a transhuman program that actually is using, there's some type of, I forget what the AI system is that they're using, but they're actually attempting to clone your consciousness. And this is something that they've gotten to a point where there's like this much success, but this much success will lead to, and I don't know how other to say than they're cloning consciousness. I can't define that, and I'm not going to try. But there was about 4 or 5 articles. Yeah, one was in the Journal of Neuropsychology, and there was a couple that I read that these guys are actually moving forward in this area, and they're having, quote, some success. And when you read and you look at the methodology and everything in the study itself, it's kind of creepy.
So for all you micromanagers, you can hang out at the beach and they'll have many clones pushing people around. Should we take a few more questions? We do have another session, and I'm sure you'll be free.
Whatever
to mix.
you want to do.
Up to you. Do you want to continue here, guys? And I'll pass the mic.
I still have gin, so.
He's got gin, so we'll pass the mic. Go ahead.
Sure.
Well, first of all, thank you for the NSA for leaking information to the public that we need. That has happened many times in the past. Lossy compression, all kinds of things. But now this is a fantastic weapon against the enemy forces, because if I understand it right, we have a way of neutralizing their neural system. Is that kind of a direction?
I can only speak from my own perspective on this. Remember, NSA Policy 1-30 says that this is my interpretation of what I think might be possible. So I guess there are many applications that this can be applied to. I'm good to an extent. I mean, I was exposed on the WikiLeaks thing, so I got no place to hide, but good idea. It is.
What are my chances out of getting a date if I use the right nanotechnology? I'm just joking, of course. Guys, the other session has started.
I'm married.
Are you married? Huh?
Yeah, sorry.
He's married. Okay. Guys, the other session has started, but I'm sure we can mix and ask questions informally. So,
Gosh, thanks everybody.
Give a round of
Appreciate it.
applause and thank you very much.